I can't have this camera issue restricting all of my level design like that. So how do we fill this void? With alcohol.
Parallax.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Soulveyor Devlog number 5. And before I just run the wish list on Steam, and also don't forget to join the Discord. So this week I've been primarily still working on the area generation of the world with my new depth system. I also imported these new grass tiles and redid the area to make it look all nice. I also added these new stairs, and while not functional just yet, they're set up to be functional when I add that type of player slope movement in the future. And this is what they look sideways as well. So this is just something that you can use to simply climb up each of the wall layers. There's still a lot more that I have to add, such as allowing things to move up these new depth layers and actually generating all of the grass and dirt tiles properly. But this week I got most of the area mesh generation down, which is very important for preventing the player from falling off the map and allowing enemies, AI, creatures, etc. to properly pathfind throughout the area. And I really just wanted to keep this week's video super simple and educational by going over what I have to work on next, which is Parallax. So let me start off by explaining why I need Parallax in my top-down game. Top-down Parallax and top-down Procraft? That doesn't make any sense. It does make sense. And the idea of using Parallax actually originally stemmed from a problem, a major problem that came with my new area depth system. So you see, before I added my new area depth system, I had simple camera boundaries in place so that if the player moved too far in one direction, the camera would stop moving. The player can still keep moving, but the camera stops and it prevents you from seeing that blank camera void. And if I go too far up, the same thing happens. And so this works beautifully. This worked beautifully back when there was only one layer that the player could possibly walk on, which was in this case the ground. But now that there's multiple layers here, see, I could climb up this layer and then this layer and then however many layers high I want to stack up, we run into this problem. So you see, pay close attention to the player. Right now, I am walking along, this is technically the Z dimension, the Z direction, forward and backwards. And so, yep, when I walk up, when I walk closer to the top of the map, the camera gets cut off and it doesn't show me that void, the camera background void. And the same thing will happen when I go to the bottom of the map. But with the new depth system, the player moves vertically along the Y axis. And so if I drag this value here, you can see the player is moving up. Now it looks like the camera is moving the same way. The camera is just moving up and down. But in reality, something completely different is happening on the back end side of things. The camera isn't just simply moving up and down. You see, here, the camera is actually moving forwards and backwards. And whereas here, the Y movement, the camera is moving up and down. And so we run into a problem. If I walk to the edge of the map, see, normal movement gets properly blocked off, but vertical movement, watch this, if the player moves up to the next layer, for example, look at that, we start to see that black void, the black camera background, that immersion breaking background. And if I go even higher, let's go to another layer, look at this, and then another, and then let's just go crazy. So look at this, you see, the problem is the camera boundary does not work in this vertical dimension. And yes, while I could write some code to prevent the camera from going out of bounds in the vertical direction, that would defeat the entire purpose of me creating this new area depth system. I need to be able to build areas that are 10, 20, 100 layers tall. And I can't have this camera issue restricting all of my level design like that. So how do we fill this void? With alcohol.
Parallax.
And so with Parallax, it'll allow the camera to follow the player wherever they go. However high or low they go, the camera will follow and it will not be restricted by the bounds of the map. But what is Parallax? This is one of my favorite games, the Kingdom series, and it's a 2D side-scroller game where you can only move along the X direction, so left and right. And for those who don't know, Parallax is this background effect you see. That volcano is really far away, and those background rocks are even closer, and there might even be some more debris like this rock over here that's in the foreground as well. And on the back end side of things, these are all technically the same distance away. It's just that the speed increases or decreases depending on how far away or how close the object is to the camera. So that volcano, for instance, moves really slow in the background. These rocks move slightly faster, and these foreground rocks and dirt over here moves even faster because it's closer to the camera. And this makes the game feel so much more immersive. When you're actually moving in the world, you can see each layer moving slower or faster, and it feels like you're actually in the game. It feels like those objects are further or closer away. And you can't really notice it too much, but those clouds, if I'm standing still, are moving ever so slightly. And so you can weave in these objects in and out of each layer and give them their own speed depending on, again, how far or close they are to the camera. And we can even do things like dynamically changing the parallax background. As you see, it's kind of like a white faded volcano rocks, but now if I move closer into the forest, it fades away and you get this forest parallax effect. You see that layer of trees in the background is further away from the actual foreground trees. And you have things like God rays scattered about, fog, clouds, bushes. And so that's the purpose of Parallax. But wait, Procraft, that game is a 2D side scroller. Soulveyor is top down. How are you going to get Parallax to work in a top down game? Well, there are plenty of games that have top down parallax effects. And so what I would do is create almost like a valley overlook. For example, if this were a forest or a plains biome that I'm in, you might see rocks, mountains, grass field, trees off in the distance, and it would still look and feel amazing. So what I need to do is remove that vertical camera boundary so that when I walk to the edge of the map, the camera still keeps following the player, and if I move through the world vertically like so, you'll start to see that background parallax, those mountains, those fields and trees off into the distance. And this doesn't need to be super detailed or anything because, again, this is all meant to be off in the distance, so I'm thinking maybe only a couple colors, 2 to 3 colors per object. And this parallax system will be modular enough to where I can also use it in Soulveyor's dual system. You see, on Soulveyor's store page on Steam, you can see what I'm talking about in the distance. I have this placeholder parallax that doesn't even move at all. The gradient changes depending on the time of day, but the mountains are just something I quickly whipped up to have off in the distance. But this new parallax system can also be applied here. And so when the player transitions to a duel, they can also use this overworld parallax depending on what biome the player is when they started the duel. So if they start the duel in a desert biome, you might also get desert parallax, some pyramids or sand dunes, cactuses. If the player's in a snowy biome, you'll see snowmen, igloos, or whatever. So this is really nice because I also get to use it here in addition to the overworld. On last Saturday's stream, I stream on Twitch every Saturday morning at 9 AM, I worked on creating some plains or forest biome parallax, which included some mountains, some trees, some grass with decals and decorations scattered about. And again, nothing too crazy complex. This is just meant to be background parallax, just a simple infinitely scrollable background parallax. And I also have a gradient on the base layer, which will change depending on the time of day. So in the morning you get a sunrise gradient, midday it might be nice and white/blue, and at night you get a sunset, and midnight it would just be pitch black or blue. And these mountains will suffice for now. I can always fine-tune them later on if I don't like the look, but the point of it is, once I get the parallax system working, I should be able to throw in whatever details I want and have it scrollable infinitely or movable infinitely in any direction. And so yes, the infinite scrollability works fine for X movement, for left and right movement, because I can just keep stacking on those images, those sprites side by side. So no matter how far the player moves in one direction, there will always be parallax. But I have to handle vertical movement a little bit differently because I can't just simply infinitely layer parallax on top of each other, because if I did that, you would start to see the bottom of the mountain on top of this other layer of mountains, and it wouldn't make any sense at all. So what I think I'm going to do for that is just simply slightly move the mountains down, for example. As the player is climbing up the map, the mountains and the grass and the trees will all slowly move down to the point where you're just seeing pretty much the sky and the sun or the moon if I have that. And I could always add things like clouds or birds, like the higher up you go. But the point is, as long as there's at least that base sky gradient, the player can climb however high they want and it doesn't matter. And so I don't actually have the code integrated just yet, but ultimately it's going to look something like this. You see, I have multiple layers consisting of the sky gradient, the mountains, the grass, the trees, and the decals. And I can just simply, for example, duplicate these trees however I want, add some more here and here and here. And I'm just gonna move the mountains here to demonstrate the example, but if the player was really climbing the world, the mountains would slowly go down into the ground, so it would look like the player's getting higher and higher, along with the ground as well would follow. And the cool part about this is these sprites tile infinitely. So if I go tile in the x-axis, it can just keep going forever and ever and ever. I'll have code in place that will basically, once this sprite is finished, place another sprite on top of it. So it just keeps scrolling however far you go. And so zoomed in, if we look up here, it will look something like this. As the player is moving slowly, the map will scroll to the left or to the right. And you can't actually see the parallax effect taking place here, which would mean that the mountains would move slower and the grass or the trees or anything up front here would end up actually moving faster. That doesn't come through in A-Sprite right here, but it will be in the actual game. And that's the big important effect, so stay tuned for that. I can't wait to show this off once I get it done, but yeah, that's Parallax. And if I finish up the area gen system along with the Parallax, by next week, I'll start working on the next topic, which also starts with a P. Why does everything start with a P on here? Pathfinding.